Following is a short demonstration of the StakeWare system. We start by going to the trust analysis comparison. Here, I am going to look at the trust index for the issue of climate change, and I'm going to make a comparison going back to March of 2015. So to the 11th of March of 2015. And in essence, what I'm doing is I'm looking at on my issue of climate change. I basically have a trust index. The projects that are in blue have more than 60% of the stakeholders are trusting in the way that we're handling the issue of climate change. So as you can see, these metrics are actually going in the right direction from March 11, 2005 to March 11, 2016, because both my trusters are increasing and my stakeholders or projects where I have high levels of distrust are actually decreasing. So let's, for example, focus on California, which is a project that was 13% of level of trusters, and now is at 75%. So let's say I wanted to find out what's driving that increase in trust. So I can go to my project, go into California, and basically see these are all the stakeholders that I have in California. This is the areas where they are located. I can also see what the network of influence is for these stakeholders. In this case, the stakeholders that are in the innermost circles are the most influential, because what you're looking at here is a network of influence. So, for example, the Environmental Protection Agency, as you can see, has a lot of relationships with most of the stakeholders in this project. And I can actually go in and look at the record of the Environmental Protection Agency, see which are the other stakeholders that are linked to it. What are the issues that I've addressed with the agency? Who are the stakeholders that are influencing the agency? What's my past activity? What is the next step that I have with that stakeholder? So in one single record, I can basically see all of the information pertaining to that stakeholder. I can also see, for example, how the organization hierarchy is organized. So if I need to find a particular person within the organization, I can rapidly do so. And I can also find all sorts of other information pertaining to the profile of the organization. I can answer different questions and segment my stakeholders so that I can do more profound analysis and ideally make better decisions on which stakeholders to engage with on specific issues. Now, if I go back to our project in California, one of the things that we can do is we can go to our dashboard where we can monitor everything that we're doing in California. And by that I mean we can combine social data, like for example, how much money has been invested in particular donations and which projects have been recipient of those donations. Also, what's the level of risk of the project? But combining that with being able to, for example, monitor social media and look at specific keywords that may be associated with California that we want to keep abreast, so that we can identify early if an issue starts becoming more important for our stakeholders. And let's say, for example, that we identify that one of our networks of sensors has an alarm that says, something has been going wrong, the CO2 emissions are large. This is an example of how we combine sensor technology with stakeholder data to help companies be more proactive and automate, for example, a situation of emergency response. So here we're looking at an oil refinery. We're looking at a normal emissions per million. But let's say that we wanted to run a scenario where some of these emissions are exceeded for some problem in the refinery. So we run that scenario. the threshold has been crossed, the systems start notification, and we're able to basically monitor the network of sensors that can tell, for example, if one of the, let's say that the wind is going at a very strong direction and one of the sensors in the refinery has exceeded the threshold and the wind is going in the southern direction, well, then there's certain intelligence to the network that can provide an early alert to the sensor that's in the south of that of the initial sensor that identified the threshold being overflown. Now, this basically gives you more detailed information, more granular data. In this scenario, as I mentioned earlier, one of the sensors in the refinery exceeds a threshold, and now we can actually initiate an emergency response. And the interesting thing about this is that all the data is integrated. So here we have a list of who our main stakeholders are, depending on the level of impact. So the innermost square is the primary area of impact, the red square is the secondary, and so on. We can actually see which are the stakeholders that are first responders, which stakeholders are trusting of how we're doing our operations or not. So get more granular data. So when it comes time to having to place a phone call, you know who the most influential stakeholder is and who will have the biggest impact if they need to propagate certain information. So if you have all of these data predefined, it is a lot easier for the company to respond in a much more rapid way. And instead of focusing on gathering information to make decisions, being able to have everything in one place so the decisions are made with the utmost veracity. So here, for example, I can immediately see who are my most influential stakeholders, and then I can make a decision, well, if we need to propagate this information, what would be the best mechanism to do so? And we can go back here and look at other information, like, for example, census information that we can integrate into the system so that if we need to evacuate people in a particular county, we know how many of these people may be 65 years or older, so we can plan accordingly. So this is a perfect example of using data to capture environmental impacts and combine that data with stakeholder analysis so that you can be more proactive as an organization and make better decisions. So this is a brief presentation of the StakeWare technology. There are a lot of other aspects to the technology, like, for example, being able to model any kind of sustainability framework. So if you want to produce a report according to a specific framework, like, for example, the Global Reporting Initiative, we can predefine different indicators and basically provide all the necessary data so that companies not just input information, but they can monitor the indicator and set up metadata so that a particular threshold gets controlled, like in the scenario that I just explained with the carbon emissions. So the system basically provides the combination of being able to gather stakeholder data, but also produce any kind of environmental or social metrics and correlate that information so that ultimately better decisions can be made. And a way to look at this is, for example, looking at these dashboards and monitoring for each one of them, what are the key indicators that need to be looked at, which ones may have exceeded a particular threshold, which ones require real-time monitoring, etc. So this provides a complete performance management system, and no matter what the indicator is, whether it's a social indicator from a non-profit organization or from a development agency or from a corporation, the technology has the ability to create those type of indicators basically build unique taxonomies and combine and model any kind of data structure that an organization need to develop. So ultimately, what you can get is improved analytics that can help understand trends, benchmark information, and ideally provide business intelligence that organizations can use to improve their performance, to identify potential risks before they become crises, or simply to make better decisions and have an enhanced collaboration both internally and externally. So this is a brief presentation of the StakeWare technology. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much for your time.